I've seen people spending months, like years, building a new data platform, and at the end, no, it was so complex that no one managed to build use cases on top.
Do you see that people even realize what you're just saying there in terms of the impact that you can have?
In many cases, there is a big question on how does that impact people.
Well, once you cut those costs, you lose the junior staff, you lose the development of expertise within your business.
When it's about saying Edosa, you need to be more efficient. It's very different. You see what I mean? So
I'm glad you said that.
I do try. It just feels like we still don't seem to have a grip.
Hello and welcome to the AI Values Podcast. I'm Lindley Gooden.
And I am Edosa Odaro.
And this episode, we are talking about one of those big stats, the big stats that show that things aren't working the way they should be with AI. Or are they? That 80% of data and AI products are never used. They just go by the wayside. And what on earth is that costing us?
Yeah, absolutely. But actually, we've talked to lots of interesting people, haven't we, on this podcast? But today, we're going to be talking to someone who has actually built the first value management platform in the world. So really someone who has a background understanding what mistakes organizations are making when they're building AI systems, building things that really shouldn't be built before, the actual outcomes that they're looking for. So really excited about that, and excited to dive into that.
And what's amazing about this interview, and he went to you to meet you face to face. I was on a little screen in the background, but you might be surprised to think that you may not be ready to do this yet. We all think that AI is steaming ahead and we're all ready to plug in some AI somewhere if you're a business. But actually, there are some very, very important things to get right. Some ducks in a row, first of all. And one of the things often businesses say, oh, we're going to make efficiencies. It's going to make our work more streamlined. And yes, it might do. But Nikola has a theory about efficiency that it may not be quite what you think it is, or quite the thing that you will achieve. I'm keeping it cryptic, but there's a fallacy in here somewhere, Edosa.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, it is fascinating. But I think beyond that, I think, he talks about the trap that a lot of organizations are actually getting into. And there's this big question as to, should you be building foundations, which a lot of people talk about, or should you be building something else? I think that's a huge, huge dilemma that a lot of leaders I'm talking to right now are actually facing. But before we jump in, I know we need to jump in straight into this interview right now, but before we do that, I have to say, so many people have been coming to me, Lindley, and asking, how can we support? You're doing so much great work here. You're bringing these conversations in, huge amounts of knowledge and information gained here with great guests as well. How can we support this podcast? And I think for me, the biggest thing, the one thing that anyone watching this right now can be doing is hitting the subscribe button. And lots of people say they don't even realize they haven't done it. So if you've been watching this, if you've been getting value out of this, please do hit the subscribe button. It's the way to keep us going, keep this podcast running, and actually bringing this value to you on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, absolutely. You are the reason that people are coming to talk to us. So I hope that's something you can we really want to see those fingers. Just click it and you'll be part of our conversation. Okay, so let's get into our guest. Our guest is Nicolas Averseng, who's the Chief Product Officer at DataGalaxy. Now, Nikola previously founded UE, one of the world's first value management platforms for data and AI investments, which was acquired by DataGalaxy. And he transforms data and AI governance from a compliance exercise into a real catalyst for genuine creation of value. He has the ideas. We can't wait to tell you what he said. Let's go and meet him right now. So, Nicolas, welcome to the AI Values Podcast. How lovely to have you here, or there.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and in person with Edosa. We don't meet so often, so it was great to fly to the nice city of Ljubljana to do this in person.
It's really nice. I'm sorry I'm not with you. I would love to share that valuable special time with you, but unfortunately I'm here in London. But listen, let's get started. Look, we spoke before we came on today, and one of the things that I wanted to start off with, we want to start off with, is look, how projects happen when you're building AI systems into your business, into your organization. And one of the things that you told us, a big mistake is about starting from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, and I think for me, yeah, that's an interesting one. But also, I think just connecting that maybe in some ways to people failing, and actually even more seriously, thinking about the lifespan of the senior data AI executive these days. The CDO, the CDIO. Is there a connection there? I mean, what's your kind of view when you're looking at things?
Yeah, that's kind of almost an obsession, I would say, in some organization to come and start by building new foundations. Let's say, hey, we need a new data platform, or we need a new whatever. Building foundations, and then or doing a bottom up data quality project and saying and kind of selling that big plan. And once we've done that, then we'll be able to go so much faster or to deliver value and so on. And the problem is that always tend to be a kind of a muddy road. and at the end, I've seen people spending months, like years, building a new data platform, and at the end, it was so complex that no one managed to build use cases on top or to deliver anything, because it was not fit for any purpose. It was just built for like an ideal castle with so many rooms that you don't find the one where you should go, and and so yeah, like having that kind of over complexity is getting there. And at the end, we have those numbers that the average tenure of chief data officers is like 14 months, anywhere between 12 and 24 months. So for me, for a role that is a transformation role or a builder role, you can't really achieve anything. So basically, you come, you say whatever happens back is legacy. You need to build new foundations, and then while you're midway there, you move to something else, or you get laid off. So that's a big challenge.
The thing is, I mean, there are multiple logics here, aren't there? Let's be honest. And if you're not used to bringing in a big transformation project like bringing AI into your business, you might think, okay, well, it's right. We need to build this. We need to make it bespoke, white label it for ourselves, and do it our way, because our way will be different to another way. Also, what about competition? We need to own this project. So you can understand why they might think that way, but how do you dissuade them from going that way? Because the figures speak for themselves, Nicola.
I think the main thing is always, it's not necessarily to say it won't be yours or whatever. It's to make sure that you start. I mean, it's always a message, and I know we've been always very aligned with Edosa on that, is we need to start from the end. We need to start from the purpose. We need to start with the users. We need to start with how they're going to actually use that stuff. And then walk back the other way around to what is the minimum, it's like the minimum viable product. What is the minimum things I need to do all the way to get to the first valuable piece for the user? So if we don't start with the users, if we don't start with the end, how it's going to be adopted, how it's going to be used, etc., we basically, I would say, always fail, or at least the chance of failure is really high. And another number I use often is that today we estimate that 80% of data or AI products in organization are actually never used. So that's a big number. That's waste, basically. And that level of waste is hardly acceptable if we think about it.
And something that strikes me in all this, of course, we're talking about value, purpose, and it all seems like, and a lot of people talk about this. It's not new, right? So, what is it that we're missing here? What is it that stops people from actually focusing? I don't know whether there's a value-focused culture. I mean, what's the thing that's stopping people from really embedding this idea and this focus in their
that's
in the
a
organizations.
great I'd say distance that exists between all the people talking about, advising about doing that, and I've seen clients doing that, deliberately choosing to do the opposite of what we tell them to do, and I don't have the definitive answer. If I had the answer, it would be. I think I would have the magic happen. But one of the hypotheses for me is that when many people come from an IT culture, an IT standpoint, and basically when you focus on the foundations, you have some kind of control on it. You have some let's say. Something concrete, something you can act on, something you have the skills to work on, and so you prefer to work on those stuff. And sometimes it's also you want to give your engineers or your IT staff something cool to work on. So let's work on AI, and you don't want to give the power back to the people on business. There's also so I think there is that attractivity to something that is tangible and saying, let's work on what I control, and the rest will be easier afterwards. And I feel like it's a trap that they go to say, they hear the story, we should start with value, and then they go back to what it's like it's a change of stuff in a way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And one thing that we grapple with on the podcast is, I mean, you don't, but from the outside world, I do sometimes, is what values really mean. And I suppose when you're building up the value, what you're trying to get out of this, if you do have that, if you, let's all go back and think about what the outcomes are of the project we're just putting into place. Do you, is it possible to form your values, your unique set of values, what you get out of this stuff by thinking ahead and really thinking about the outcomes? I would say probably we go in with a lot of human values, but actually this is different. This is actually building up the purposes, the outcomes, how you stop that project from failing, isn't it?
Yes, I think that there is different ways to think about it, and sometimes indeed when we talk about value, people misunderstood, let's say, economical value or ROI. That's the most frequent word I hear is ROI, and but what we really mean by value is more abstract than that in a way, because it can be anything. As long as it's, let's say, bring some benefit to the user, it has value. Then the question is, how do you realize that value? What do we mean by value? And of course, how does it align with the company values or the social values? Because we don't want to, because anything we do has impact on employment or has impact on people, on behaviors and so on. So I think that question around value is actually very basic in a way, because it starts from what I usually call the product management approach. Say if you build a product, whatever it is, a data product or an AI product or a car or a washing machine, at the end it's a product, and you always start with, why do people buy that? What is the value for them, and how are they going to benefit from it? So again, if you buy a wash machine, it's because it will gain time for you, probably, or maybe no, because it's less, it's consuming actually less water than if you do it by hand, or it's better clean, whatever. You have a lot of different benefits that are there, but the first one was probably time.
Time efficiency. But one thing that struck me just now, what you're saying, is when you create so-called values in AI or a data product per se, that you can have an impact. Like, for instance, it could be worse for employees. It could be worse for something else. It almost feels like, to me, that this kind of idea of AI solving one problem here, but creating one or two more problems somewhere else. I mean, are you seeing that? Because you talk to so many senior leaders, you're on tons of projects, etc. Do you see that people even realize what you're just saying there in terms of the impact that you can have, and how are they relating to that?
Yeah, I think the easiest one is usually, so yes, we see that, and the most obvious one is usually impact on employment, because when we think about AI, we think about productivity gain or things like that. So in many cases, there is a big question on how does that impact people. And so do I need less people? Will I not hire more people? etc., etc. So then one of the big threats that happens to, I've seen AI project being blocked because of that, because you fear for good reasons about what is the impact on my people, and will it raise some problem with the unions, workers' union, and so on.
Interesting.
So that's a big one. Of course, we also see more and more people concerned about the environmental impact. So it's not only saying, okay, is it worth it? Is again, of course, we can look at it the other way. You have people using AI to improve their carbon footprint, and that you can. So then it's a balancing problem. You can have things which are more societal. Do you want to completely disintermediate your relationship with your clients? So if you put an AI bot, then maybe you lose something also in terms of feedback, understanding, and touch. So is that what you want? Is it how you want to deal with your clients and etc.? So I think we can see a lot of different things. Usually, the human part is maybe the most important one, but you can think again about this more generally the ESG part or whatever is could be interesting. Of course, then the typical one around impact on revenue or impact of an old thing in product management is when you launch a new product, do you cannibalize the sales on your other products?
Yes.
So maybe you could do that also. Yeah. So that's in a way nothing new, but with a very widespread impact, because AI is touching all dimensions of the organization, all disciplines, all workers, all from top to bottom. So it's one of the deepest opportunity we had for a long time. So
interesting. You may not know this, Nikola, that I'm an information ethics obsessive. I really care about the information we get and spread. Right, that's my world. I've been in communications for a long time, and communications people can be the worst communicators. Okay, now that was before AI. If we don't, I am making a point to you perhaps here that if we don't have clarity in our purpose with AI, and we don't communicate that to each other, we don't tell each other when things are going wrong, we don't tell each other what we're trying to get out of it, then things will always fail. Do you think there's a case for this analog, talk more, communicate better, understand more? Because I think if we are going to launch these huge projects, as is happening now, and if 80% fail, we're not talking about it, and we could get out of that thing and move it around and do something better earlier in the process. Is that just me as a obsessive, or is that something that you think people could do too?
No, I don't even think that's so obsessive. I think it should be almost basic for me, because again, when the key is always we need to build stuff for adoption in a way, and so we need to be really clear about what does it mean for people to use that? What does it mean for people to interact in terms of training, in terms of it has to be reliable, it has to be stable on the time, so it has to be sustainable in a way, and so that's really important. And the other thing is we need to. I lost my mind on what I wanted to say here, but.
We can always come back to it. It's joining up the dots, I think, isn't it? There is always going to be a breakdown if people aren't really clear and honest about their progress.
I got my point exact back. Is that one of the key things we see is rise of user experience principle applied to AI also.
Okay.
Because this question is when people see something, how do you give them either a hint of where is it coming from? Is it something automatically generated and so on? So it's trust also. It's to know that.
Yes.
But also to build some kind of explainability of transparency of where does that finding comes from. For example, initially when you talk to a ChatGPT, you don't know where it comes from. No more and more, when you ask for some other things, you see the sources or you see some information that helps you also better assess where is that based from, and you can dig further and so on. So, but that's just one example. But this idea also of having those conversations, of course, but also it drives the pressure of making sure that we drive that transparency, because otherwise there is that kind of trust issue that is coming also.
Yeah. I think for me, obviously trust's extremely important. but before I mean, we might dive into trust a bit deeper. But I think I just want to pull you back on something we're talking about just beforehand, really around this piece with, efficiency, employees, and the fact of, that's one of the key, especially when you think of Gen AI, that's one of the key things that people talk about in terms of how do you get, let's call it ROI from Gen AI, right? So are you really seeing that people are actually getting this so-called efficiency and actually able to make it tangible, or is it all a fallacy? I mean, is it something people talk about but never actually materialize?
That's a great point indeed, because I've been mentioning the fallacy of efficiency in a way, because that's one of the hardest gain to realize when we think about value. This efficiency gain is really hard to realize, and that's real story. You come and you say, hey, I will launch that new whatever chatbot or AI agents and so on, and we will be 30% more efficient.
Right.
Then how do you realize that gain? What do you do? Are you going and you will have a discussion with your CFO at some point. You will say, "Oh, that's great! I remove 30% of your budget next year."
Yeah.
Or, "Oh, cool! We have a growth plan next year, so we don't need to hire anyone more because you will absorb that." Or maybe, "Oh, that's a good opportunity because we will improve the quality of service because there's stuff we can't do with our people, so we'll do more with the same amount of people." But in many cases, if you do the sum in organization of the project have been done for efficiency and the actual realization, there is a huge gap. So that ability to track the actual realization of efficiency gain is really hard, except if sometimes there are some cases where you had direct impact on employment, then you could measure that. But otherwise, when it's just about we're going to be more efficient, that the hard question is, but how do we realize that? And again, that part is in many cases actually it's lost. And we see that a lot with GenAI, where a lot of the promise was your teams are going to be more efficient and so on. And I don't have a lot of success stories of people who say, because we acquired whatever, Copilot, we are really way more efficient. And what does it mean for us in terms of organization is a hard one. Yeah.
I wonder.
Please, Edosa, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder, Lindley, if is there such a term as the fallacy of efficiency? I mean, is there such a thing?
I just think it's fantastic. Every discussion, I've been speaking to senior leaders for a long time, and AI has come into that obviously much more in recent years. But efficiency, we don't talk about it, but it comes up all the time. You just know in terms of the nature of the conversation, it's really about cutting costs. Now, one thing that I have a problem with is actually, once you cut those costs, you lose the junior staff, you lose the development of expertise within your business. You also, from my point of view, from the outside, from a journalist point of view, you have fewer people who know what to look out for and know how to interpret the results you're getting. And so I think what you do, there's a danger that you can break, by focusing on efficiency, you can break the relationships that make the business work. You get much more capability in the short term, but you perhaps lose sustainability. What do you think about that, Nikola?
Yeah, I think it's always the thing about when you want to optimize anything is you can look at it in a very brutal way, or you can look at it as a systemic way. And I think if you look at it in a systemic way, then you don't necessarily lose things. You can actually. It's like when we work on being compliant with regulations. You can look at it in a very basic way, and then it's a burden. Or you can look at how are you going to embed that in your operating model, in your ways of working, and actually you might have a very smart way to comply with the intent without adding that as an additional layer of stuff. So that's kind of so in many ways, I don't necessarily look at efficiency as a bad word. It's because if you look at it as a systemic way, when it's about saying, Edosa, you need to be more efficient, it's very different. You see what I mean? So
I'm glad you said that.
I do try.
Finally.
Yeah, please. I'll throw it to Odaro. We're going to close up our core interview, and we'll have an extended chat, which will run later on. for listeners and viewers. But Edosa, yeah, please seal the deal. Anything else that's scratching away at you, Edosa?
Oh, there's lots of things scratching away. Listen, the one thing that does strike me here as we're talking about all this is it just feels like, we're at this point where there's so much AI, so much hype, so much investment, but we're still talking about almost the most important thing to do with why we're doing this in the first place, value.
Yeah.
And we still don't seem to have a grip on, do people really understand really what is value? How, I think it strikes me as something so fundamental, and yet it feels so misunderstood.
Abstract,
You're right in there. You're Mr. Value. you built out, I would say, probably the first value platform globally. How are you seeing this? Are we improving? Are people getting better understanding what this is? Are we crossing that line? Are we getting there?
I would love to say yes. It's something that struck me a lot, because as you say, I built and shipped one of the first value management platform basically, but the gap between the interest of people and the willingness to act upon that is always striking. That's because and in many cases I had something like, no, that's really interesting and we really need that, but first I'm going to deploy my data platform.
Right.
Or whatever it could be. So first, I have some stuff to put in order in my room, whatever. So, and it's like if you say, "Yeah, I will cook for you, but first I will build a new kitchen," So, and so where you just want pasta with tomato sauce. So I think we see over the last few months, years, a bit more attention to that, especially with that awareness around the level of waste. And I think the good thing is that AI is costing a lot. So then you have a more vetted interest on having value out of it in a way. And because there is also that fear or threat of the side effect of the impact. So then when you start what always worked in terms of value is a defensive value. That always worked. When you think about being compliant, being, regulations, etc., when it's defensive, it's always good. You put a law or you put a regulation, people will comply and no one will discuss even maybe the cost sometimes. So when you look at it with in a way, AI is bringing a lot of opportunities, but it's carrying so much risk at the same time that then we see people being more and more concerned about that and more willing to have that holistic view, saying, okay, how do we invest? How do we care about that? How are we going to support the value story? And because there is no value story without the downside of it, which is associated risk, associated cost, etc. And then you balance that, and that's where even when many people are complaining about the AI regulations in Europe, but it's a heavy one in a way, but the base of the discussion is not so bad. The base of the discussion is, do you know why you do it? What is the intent? Is the intent worth the risk? And then because the risk comes with obligations to have mitigation measures or security measures or explainability measures, etc. So at the end, it's about balancing all of that. But what I always say is that even in the US, companies would or not need to comply with the AI Act. They should have most of that thinking. Otherwise, at some point, we'll see some magnificent failures in the news, and journalists will be happy to report that.
Don't worry, you're only on the record right now. Listen, that was wonderful. Let's peel away and pull up the drawbridge for that core interview. We will continue to chat, and we'll put that out as an extended interview shortly. But for now, Nicola, thanks so much for being there with Edosa.
Thank you so much for having me. Great. Really happy to talk about that with you.
Really good to have you, Nicola. And I know we've been talking about this for a while, and you actually flew all the way here. And yes, it's been incredible to have you.
Yeah,
thank you.
My pleasure.
So Nicolas, oh my goodness, he was quite an interview. really wasn't it? I mean, that was fascinating. We went through so much. I don't even know. I'm thinking now, what were the key things I pulled out? Can you think of a key thing, Lindley? I mean, what was a key thing you pulled out of this interview?
Well, he was cool as a cucumber as he told us what not to do. And some of that stuff, I think a lot of the people watching us, listening to us, if you're in business, you're thinking, well, this is exactly what I should be doing. One of the most important things for me, because it is a word used all the time, it's the fallacy of efficiency. If you're looking to make, optimize your efficiency, no, that's not the right way to go. It should always be about productivity, about doing more interesting things, about allowing your organization, whatever your organization is, to do more, not to chop out. That shouldn't be the focus. And actually also that, any organization going into an AI product, into an AI process, you've got to get your ducks in a row. You've got to be ready for it. And that is absolutely fundamental. Otherwise, you're not getting in.
Yeah, I think, there's so much going on there. Look, one of the biggest things for me was this idea, and I think it's huge across industry at the moment, about building foundations. And it's from this interview, you get a sense for how many organizations, how many leaders actually falling into this trap, so to speak, right? And really, his kind of take on what he's seen to be successful is starting completely the other way around, and really starting with users and outcomes as opposed to foundations and tech. So fascinating conversation, and I think is one that certainly was worth watching. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that's about as much as we can take on into this episode, Lindley. So we've got to be saying goodbye. It's been an amazing conversation, and I really thank everyone for watching. And of course, like I say, at the start, the big thing that you can do to keep this going, keep this conversation going, keep the quality of this podcast going, is to hit the subscribe button. Is the one big thing that you can do to support us, even though it is perhaps the simplest thing in terms of clicking a button.
Yeah. But do, because, it's so important, not only to us, but to the people who are getting in touch with us about having conversations that aren't just rooted in business. This one was, but it's much more than that. It involves all of us. We are all asking questions about AI, genuine questions. So having an honest guest like Nikola doesn't come without having you guys watching and listening to us. So thanks very much for doing it. If you've done it already, if you haven't, please do. And of course, you can find us very simply on YouTube at AI Values. That's the simplest way, or you can just go and look us up online, and we're everywhere talking about this stuff. So thank you for watching. It's been great to have you with us. Edosa, thanks as always. And until next time, all the best. Take care.
And it's goodbye from me.